Border Network for Human Rights always, for the last 15 years in this community, has been the voice on immigration and border policy. And so when they bring people together, I try to join them as frequently as I can because I have so much respect for the work that they do. But more importantly, because the issue that they're focused on is a critical issue for the nation and for our community, and that's immigration reform. Now, the rally is about Arizona and 1070, and a lot of the conversations that have been happening are around that particular piece of immigration. But it's the broader picture, the broader issue is the fact that because the federal government hasn't enacted comprehensive immigration reform, you now have states reacting in ways that are detrimental to their community, I think detrimental to the country, detrimental to their economies. And the idea that the state of Texas might go in that same direction is too risky and dangerous for us to remain silent. And this should be a reminder that we all need to push on the federal government and to be unrelenting when it comes to demanding comprehensive immigration reform.
What are your specific thoughts about the legislation in Arizona?
You know, I think that the Arizona courts are going to be tied up for years with this legislation because I think that there are going to be several constitutional challenges to it. In fact, I just read an article that they're already having to go in and rewrite it. And so I think that the more that they evaluate what they've done, the more they will realize it's going to tie up their court system for years. It's also going to redirect their local law enforcement. I think at some point, even supporters in Arizona are going to realize that their local property tax dollars are going to enforcing federal immigration law and not their local needs. And they're going to wake up and they're going to realize it's incredibly misguided and unfortunate legislation.
Now, this is a markedly different position. You find yourself on the opposite side of this issue from your opponent in the November election in your race for county judge. You're the Democratic Party nominee. The Republican nominee, Heyman, has taken a position of supporting the legislation in Arizona, and even going so far as to suggest that the state of Texas enact similar legislation. Your thoughts on that?
You know, it's good that he's trying to kind of flesh out our very differing opinions on this and on other issues. I think we're going to see him try to take positions on other issues as well. You know, it's a way to rally votes for himself and against me because this is a very divisive issue. You know, I was just thinking this morning, I wonder if next he's going to come out with some abortion stance or, you know, kind of pick every possible controversial, divisive stance possible so that we don't look at the more significant and pressing issues of our local race. Nevertheless, you know, my position on immigration has never been a secret. My position on border policy is long established for the last 15 years of my life. And so it's good that the public understands his position as well.
And what do you think of the impact of legislation like this on communities like El Paso in the border region?
It would be the most fiscally irresponsible thing we could do. It would be very harmful to the community itself. There'd be a lot of division. You'd see the spiritual community and the advocacy community on one side. You'd see kind of the reactionary folks who feel a lot of xenophobia. I mean, that's really kind of the fundamental thing behind a lot of this. It's not good for communities. And so, but all of this is kind of from this simmering cauldron of inaction from the federal government. And the federal government, I think, is afraid to act because it's a complicated issue. I mean, some of the root causes of migration are deeply rooted in the American economy. And you have the federal government sort of refusing to acknowledge that in many ways. So to deal with the root causes of immigration and migration would be for the federal government, would mean for the federal government to take a long, hard look at what's happening in our own country.
So my final question, you talked about comprehensive immigration reform. What does that look like? What do you think of what if you had the opportunity to have a voice in the decision-making process about what comprehensive immigration reform looked like? What would it be?
It would be a balance between enforcement and citizenship and naturalization too frequently what we see from Congress is bills that focus on enforcement. That's what we're seeing right now. Criminalization instead of naturalization. When you have, that was a nice stirred sandwich. When you have hundreds of thousands of people contributing to the economy, working in our communities, raising their families, who have to live in the most hidden way possible, that's not good for a nation. And it's not, and from a fiscal perspective, it's not good for your economy. From the, American principles and values, it's not what our country was founded on. So it would have to be a balance, not enforcement only. Enforcement only is the worst way to go. So you've got to have those two arms of immigration reform, where you deal with the root causes of migration, the immigrants who are established and living here, a fair process for getting here, and then you also deal, on the other hand, with enforcement. But enforcement with rules and accountability and transparency, things that are expected of the local governments, we need to expect of our federal governments.
Thank you.
Okay.
¿Qué queremos, compañeros? ¿Qué queremos?
Brings you out here today.
Well, I've been living in and working on the borderlands for decades and decades, and one of the things that we really need to understand in the United States is what it's like to live in a community that's under siege, where people can get picked up on roads in the middle of everyday life, coming back and forth to their home, going grocery shopping, taking their kids to school, going to church, and this Arizona law is just a terrible, terrible extension of that kind of big brother government policy over everybody who lives in the borderlands, but especially people of Mexican origin.
What do you think it does to the relationship between the immigrant community and law enforcement?
It's an effort to split them apart. But one of the things that's been really, really heartening, it's really been meaningful, is to see the response from a lot of law enforcement. Law enforcement is very split in Arizona. The Phoenix Police Department, the Heyman Sheriff, the Tucson Police Department, a lot of law enforcement in Arizona does not want this law, and it's not just because the law is a bad law in giving local law enforcement federal immigration powers, but it actually requires them and forces them to enforce immigration law, and they know that it's bad. And I'd say locally in El Paso, it's very important that we maintain the excellent standards that have been set by the El Paso County Sheriff and the El Paso City Police Department.
Now, the protest is here at the site of the Republican Party headquarters. Why this location?
Well, at some point the Republicans have to take some responsibility for using racism and xenophobia to get people elected. They like to have the anti-immigrant card and the fear of Mexico and the fear of Mexicans card when it comes time to distract people from Katrina, from the failed war in Iraq, from all of the scandals of the Bush administration. They were happy to play that card, starting with Sensenbrenner back in 2005. I remember how that was used to get themselves away from that kind of bad attention. The Republicans have to take responsibility for whipping up fear.
Good job.